Welcome, everyone, to a very special edition of my podcast here. I am your host, Mike. This is the Washington Wrestle Talk. This is a special episode of a recap of NXT Takeover Phoenix, which I had just finished watching up. I would have done this earlier, about an hour earlier or so, but circumstances beyond my control led me to missing the first hour live, so I just watched it an hour behind. But as always, you know, they always deliver with these takeover events, and let's get right into it with the first match being, you know, the NXT Tag Team title match between the Undisputed Era and the War Raiders. The War Raiders came out to a Viking war theme entrance, which was really cool to see. Had guys with spears and pikes and shields, and as the music of the War Raiders began, they're pounding these weapons against the shields. You know, just an incredible match between the two teams. I think with, you know, the Undisputed Era, you know, Strong and O'Reilly losing the titles, don't be surprised to see them called up to the main roster either this Monday or even maybe surprise entrance in the Rumble tomorrow. But the War Raiders win the titles. Just a lot of back and forth, crazy action. If you've never seen the War Raiders, Ray, Rowe, and Hanson, oh my God. They do a spot where Rowe will have one guy, you know, in a body slam position, and Hanson will load the other guy up onto Ray's shoulders in a power bomb. I mean, and sometimes that can be upwards of about 400 pounds that this guy's holding, and he just slams them down. But Hanson, oh my God, for a 300-pound man, he is surprisingly agile, surprisingly quick. Does a handspring off the ropes into a back elbow. He does cartwheels, kind of reminiscent of an old Bam Bam Bigelow type, but, you know, he's more athletic than Bigelow ever was. But War Raiders win the titles tonight. That was your first match. Second match was a grudge match between Cassius Ohno and Matt Riddle. Hang on one second. Okay, we are back. Had a little technical difficulty here. You know, the story going into this was Cassius Ohno felt disrespected because he came back 2 years ago to NXT after being released in, I believe it was when it just became NXT, you know, from Florida Championship Wrestling. But, you know, he had seen all these big name talents coming through, you know, guys like Shinsuke Nakamura, Finn Balor, just to name a few. But, you know, and Matt Riddle being touted as the shiny new toy by Cassius Ohno. It was a pretty hard-hitting, brutal affair. If you've never seen Matt Riddle before, he was an MMA fighter. He was with the UFC actually at one point. I believe his record was 6-1 in MMA fights. He's been wrestling for about 4 years, but the guy just has so much charisma. I mean, he's charming. He calls everybody bro or bro, you know. But, you know, he wins the match by just viciously elbowing Ohno repeatedly in the face over and over and over to the point where Ohno just has to tap out. And it was kind of funny. Ohno was still tapping out long after the bell rang and the ref raised Riddle's hand. So it'll be interesting to see where Cassius Ohno goes from here. The next match that was up was, actually before the next match started, we were treated to the NXT UK men's and women's champions in the crowd. Pete Dunne and Tony Storm were in attendance. Of course, there's the big Royal Rumble Access tournament that's going on, which will be streamed next weekend on the WWE Network. So just go from there, and we'll see what that is all about. But the next match that we saw that came up was the North American Championship match between Gargano and Ricochet. Holy crap! This match delivered exponentially. I mean, if this isn't given a 5-star rating by Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer, I'll know he's not human. Okay? I mean, it had everything that needed to be a 5-star match. It had, it had action, it had false finishes, had high spots, it had the crowd just into it. When a crowd chants "Fight Forever" in a match, it's something good. Or when they chant, NXT, then you have something special. And I don't know what it is about Johnny Gargano, but ever since he signed with NXT, he constantly puts on these amazing matches. Except for, when he wasn't in the War Games match, this past War Games. Ricochet, same thing. I mean, I've been following this guy for, I think the first time I ever saw him was a clip from IWA Mid-South when he faced Matt Sydal, and he was all of 17 at the time. And here he is now, 30. So it's been quite a while. I mean, and to see where Ricochet's come from, where he's come from, where he's been, and how he got here to this point, is just truly amazing. But in the end, Gargano does a brainbuster onto exposed concrete floor, and then does a slingshot DDT to win the North American Championship and be the third North American title holder. The first being Adam Cole, and then Ricochet, and now it's Johnny Gargano. Gargano, this is his first singles title in NXT. He's been a tag team champion, but never held singles gold until tonight. The next match after that was the NXT Women's title match, which had the storyline of, the badass Shayna Baszler, former MMA fighter, in her second reign of NXT women, being an NXT Women's title holder against the undefeated upstart, Bianca Belair. There were moments in that match where, Baszler was just absolutely having her way with Belair, and it looked like Belair was just overwhelmed completely. This first time on the big stage, the bright lights. But, she handled herself well. I think there's a couple highlights that I need to point out here. And one gimmick that Bianca Belair has is she's got this long, very long braid of hair that she uses as a weapon. It's called the hair whip. And she hit Baszler with this hair whip so hard, it sounded like a chop to the stomach, and it legitimately opened up a cut on the side of Shayna Baszler, on the side of her stomach and ribs. It was pretty intense. And then another thing that really stood out to me was when Baszler had her finishing maneuver, the Karafuda clutch, and Belair stood up, the first attempt, had it in for a few moments. She stood up, like the Phoenix, no pun intended, rising, and got out of it. But the second time, she wasn't so lucky. She passed out. So Shayna Baszler is still your NXT Women's Champion. But Bianca Belair, I think, is going to be something special in the next, in the coming future. Just keep your eye out for this young lady. She's called the EST of NXT, and we'll see what she can do in the coming future. And then finally we come to the main event. Tommaso Ciampa defends the NXT Championship against former champion, the man he took the title from, Aleister Black. Now, I've been a fan of Aleister Black for quite some time now, even before he was with NXT, before he, went on the first UK title tournament. Ever since he had been with ICW in Scotland, and I saw some of his matches in WXW in Germany. Don't be fooled by the guy's appearance. I mean, he's got tattoos everywhere. I mean, and it's also known that he is a Satanist, which, hey, to each their own. But if you can provide entertainment for the people that pay the money, then by all means, be whatever you want. But it was a back and forth match. They're trying to build Ciampa up as a guy who thinks he's the best sports entertainer in the world. We'll see how that pans out. Sometime, between now and the Takeover New York or New Jersey or wherever the next one is, WrestleMania weekend. But we'll see what happens. Let's see if he gets called up to the main roster. Believe it or not, he has been on the main roster once. You will have to look on YouTube to find it, though. But it is worth watching, and you can see the difference between then at Tommaso Ciampa then, the Ciampa now. But in the end, Ciampa defeats Aleister Black to retain the NXT Championship. And at the end of the show, as Ciampa was celebrating on the ramp, Johnny Gargano came out, and the two former partners in DIY held up their titles, as, symbolic of, they said they said we couldn't make it here, and we've done that. Kind of reminiscent of WrestleMania 20 with Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. So that is my recap of NXT Takeover Phoenix. It was great, actually. But then again, all takeover events are great. I would rate this a 9 out of 10. There was just a small spot where, some water had spilled in the ring or outside the ring, and Aleister Black slipped on it. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but other than that, everything was just spot on, solid. Let's see if the main roster can follow up with the Royal Rumble tomorrow. I will be doing an earlier episode tomorrow with the weekend review. Some big news in the world of wrestling. And then tomorrow evening, I will do my Royal Rumble recap. So until then, guys, take care. And this has been the Washington Wrestle Talk. I'm Mike, and I will talk to you again soon. Have a good night.